بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. We're beginning our Bayqunyyah class for today, inshallah ta'ala. أعاننا الله وإياكم ويسر وخفف. In our last class, we had started to speak about the hadith, or the type of hadith referred to as as-sahih. And we mentioned that there are conditions, okay? Normally, we refer to them as 5 conditions. However, you could say that it is, or they are up to 7 different conditions. So let's review those conditions and then we'll move forward, inshallah ta'ala. We said, first of all, you have to have ittisal. Ittisal is connectivity. And while we are speaking on this, let's go ahead and let's do a white screen, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so my conditions that I am looking for in order to label a hadith authentic, I am looking for ittisal. Then my next requirement is adala, adl. Then my next one is dabt. Then my next one is no shudud, and shudud is oddities. And then the last one is wala illa, or bila shududin wala illa. And an illa is a hidden defect. Well, actually, let me do it like this. So shudud and illa. All right, so what does ittisal mean? It means connectivity. Okay, it has 2 ends. Connectivity. Adala means trustworthy, or trustworthy, just we'll say trustworthy. Okay, next one is dabt, and dabt is accuracy. Next one is, move that so it's not a distraction. That. Too many things open. Okay, this should make things a little bit easier. Now I can't see. Let me see, can I move this somewhere? Ah, here we go. Okay. Oh, ya Allah. Why does it do that? All right, we'll just do it. We'll write it over again. Let's do it right here. So we said ittisal, and we said that's connectivity. Then we have adala. So adala, and that is the narrator needs to be trustworthy. Then we have dabt, right? And we said that is accuracy. All right. Then we have no shudud, and shudud we said is oddities. Shudud, okay. All right, oddities. And the last one is no illah. And what is illah? It's a hidden defect. Okay, something that's not clear and understood. Now, in oddities, we're looking for on both ends, the sanad and the matn, both. Okay. All right. And the same thing with the illah. We're looking at the sanad and the matn. The oddity could be in the sanad, meaning that there's something strange happening in someone's chain, differing from everyone else who narrated the same exact information. Okay. And it could be in the matn where the wording has been changed. Okay. In a way that basically when you compare it with everyone else that narrated the same information, this one's different. What about the illah? The illah could be something that overall normally people won't figure out when they first look at the hadith. Like seeing Abu Ubaidah narrating from his father, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. You know Abu Ubaidah is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's son. So you look at it and you say, oh, okay, this must be authentic. Why? Because that's his son. Makes sense, right? But in reality, once you start digging, you realize, oh, he actually never heard anything from his father. Okay. So this is going to matter, and it's going to matter greatly, because many people will come and say, oh, the hadith is fine. And then you get one or two people come and say, no, the hadith is weak. Sometimes they'll say why, and sometimes they'll forget to say how or why. And then we're left scratching our heads. Well, why is the hadith weak? That's Abu Ubaidah. He's narrating from his father. I mean, that's the norm. Okay. So it could be in the sanad of the narration. It could also be in the matn of the narration, meaning something was added, like the hadith of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah and the Prophet ﷺ wiping on his khuf. Everyone narrates it in that same exact way. The Prophet ﷺ wiped on his khuf. Pretty straightforward and easy. Yet in one of the chains it says on his socks. Even though that same incident is narrated numerous occasions and does not say that. It does not say socks. So something happened with that exact narration, that chain. Okay. Tamam. Like in today's class, we're going to do a little visual explanation of what a sanad looks like. And then we're going to be speaking about the dabt. Okay. And then we'll speak a little bit about accuracy. Tamam. First, let's draw out what a sanad will look like. Let's see. I don't know what these shapes do. So we'll say this is a narrator. Okay. This is a narrator. This is a narrator. And this is the original speaker. Okay. So right here, let's do this and let's make it red to be clear. So this is our first narrator, number one. Okay, maybe that's not a one. Here we go. All right. And what I mean by first, I mean who's telling us. So this would be like Imam al-Bukhari. And we usually just do that for Bukhari. And we'll say, for example, this is Umar. Okay. And then Umar, it's either him speaking or the Prophet ﷺ. And we're going to get into that later on in the actual verses of poetry. We'll actually see when it stops at a Sahabi, what is it called? How does this impact us, etc. And when it stops at the Tabi'i, okay, and so on. All right. So here you have the chain, and this right here we can call it the end of the chain. All right. In the science of hadith, we call where Umar is, right? We call this the highest point. And we call the final narrator, who we take from his book directly, we call him the lowest point. The closer you are to the original speaker is called Ali. And we're going to take that too, inshallah ta'ala. We're just not speaking about that right now. The further you're away is called Nazil. All right. Tamam. Now, when I say, look up here, I say I need ittisal. That means I'm trying to verify that these people right here actually met. That's what I mean by ittisal. Now, how thorough are you in investigating that connectivity between narrator 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 3 and 4? Your requirements, your investigation will matter in our final assessment. This brings us to something that we'll see later on when we're speaking about tadlis, inshallah ta'ala, is the modes of transmission. So sometimes they'll say, for example, let's make this blue, right? Sometimes they'll say an. Sometimes they'll say haddathana. And sometimes they'll just say tha, right? Or thana with a noon. Sometimes they'll just do it like that. Or amba'ana. Or let's see, what else? Sami'tu, right? So these are the different types of statements and concepts used while transmitting. Normally, an is usually the easiest way. And it's normally okay, it suffices. Unless the person is a mudallis, but we'll get to tadlis later on, inshallah ta'ala. This is your first step, is that you're trying to confirm those red lines between the narrators. You're trying to understand and see, did they really meet each other? So what am I going to be looking for? I'm going to read Bukhari's biography. Right? Kind of covered up the kha. I'm going to read what? Bukhari's biography. I want to know who his teachers are. Right? And then once I identify his teachers and I can pinpoint that Fulan here is indeed the teacher of this person here, and they were with each other for a duration. I don't need to know exactly. I don't need to know how many times they were with each other, but the more the better, obviously. Okay. So I need to confirm that relationship. And then I need to confirm that teacher's relationship with his teacher. So in other words, the teacher's what? The teacher's teacher. After I confirm this, then I move on to the teacher's teacher with his teacher, with his sheikh. Were they connected? Yes or no? And that's your primary first step is, are these people students or did they meet? Can I verify that they were indeed together? So I'm looking for stories, right? I'm looking for a third person coming in and saying, oh, I was in a majlis and Bukhari was sitting with his Sheikh Abu Nu'aym and they were talking about something. This is perfect. Why? Because now I have a witness. And it makes it stronger, makes the claim more powerful. Okay. Why? Because I have witnesses. Now, if Bukhari, for example, says Sami'tu, and I know Bukhari is a trustworthy person, all right, I'm not going to doubt it. Okay. Normally, I'm not going to doubt that. All right, that's great. Same when if he were just to say an, normally I'm not going to doubt him. Mumtaz, jazakallah khair. Unless there's a reason for me to doubt him. Okay. That's how you look for connectivity. My next step, my next condition would be what? The adala. While I was studying the biography of these narrators, I was also checking up on what did their peers think of them? How was their memory? How was their behavior? So while I'm studying their biography to identify their teacher, I'm also trying to see, how did their peers think of them? Was he peer reviewed? Was he tested? Did he give the correct answers? Did we compare what he narrates and people from his era narrate of the same information? This is what's called, you'll find this in things like al-mustakhraj. A mustakhraj is a book that takes a book of hadith that's known, well circulated, and presents the same hadith but with their own chain. And it might vary. It might be from the same teacher. It might be from other teachers throughout the chain. We love these books, mustakhrajat, because it's extra verification that this individual, either he had dabt or he didn't. This is perfect. Tamam? This is what I'm looking for. Once I identify that the person has adala, and I found that out through his biography, and then I identified that the person had dabt, accuracy, then I can start moving on with my conditions. However, accuracy varies. It varies with a person day to day. Why? Because people can forget. People can make mistakes. And since that is the case, since that is a fact, accuracy can vary. Arguably, we could claim, you and I, that for the sahih, I'm looking for 95, maybe 95 to 100% accuracy. Maybe 90 is okay. But overall, their attitude is closer to 95. Tamam. One moment. Assalamu alaikum. Now, so as I said, generally speaking, we're looking at something from 90 to 100% accuracy, but overall the attitude of the muhaddithin has always been closer maybe to 95. Okay. Now, once accuracy drops below that level, things change slightly. And the change here has to do with the appetite the scholars of hadith have when accepting that person's narration. And we could arguably say that the scholars of hadith, if we say 100, right, we'll say 90 to 100, okay, and we'll say that's sahih. Okay, I'll just put a sad here for sahih. Hasan would be from 89 to 75. Anything below that would be da'if. Hasan would be here in between the 89 and 75. Because dabt is going to connect back to what? To memory, normally. There's another type of dabt, because dabt could be dabtu kitab, which is what you have written down, and or dabtu sadrin, what you have memorized. We normally prefer kitab over sadr, that what was written, more than that which was memorized, because it's not reliant on the individual's memory. if you meet a scholar of hadith, or if we find one of these narrators who had both, this is perfect. This is perfect. But even while sometimes scholars might write down their what they have memorized, there are times when they lose their book, or if they allow others to edit their book or to review their book, and their memory was not all that great. And that's dangerous. Also, there are times where the individual is problematic, like a mudallis. However, even though he's a mudallis and he has not expressed connectivity, his hadith would still be accepted. And I'll get more into tadlis later on. How could it be accepted even though he's a known mudallis, meaning he narrating from people he did not necessarily meet? Because if he received a copy of that sheikh's books, like Abu Zubayr al-Makki, being a mudallis, a lot of problems with his narrations overall, but his narration from Al-Layth ibn Sa'd, even though he didn't meet him, he had a copy of his book. He was not narrating from memory. All of these types of details will come up while you're doing the proper research in regards to that individual. Okay. Then you come to your shudud. Now, your first type of shudud that you're looking for here is going to be what? In the sanad itself. And you do that by comparing the chain you have with other chains that are narrating the same incident. Okay. So if you find discrepancies, if these impact the meaning that is ultimately understood, then you'll call those shudud. If it doesn't, then you'll call it ziyadat thiqah, an addition by a trustworthy narrator along the way that has not impacted the meaning in a negative way. Okay. Then you look at the matn, and it'll be the same concept. Then you go to hidden defects. You see, if Bukhari was a mudallis and he said an, that would be a red flag normally. Why? Because he's not telling me that he heard, he's saying an. And since he's a mudallis, I have a reason to doubt his an. Okay, and then illa in the text, same thing. There's reasons to believe that there's an issue within the statement itself. So there's your sahih hadith. We've done a complete review. We have more of a little drawing to give us better visuals. Now let's go on to this 89 to 75 rate. And what does that actually mean? How does that affect us? Well, let's read what the author has to say. He says, وَالْحَسَنُ الْمَعْرُوفُ طُرْقًا وَغَادَتْ رِجَالُهُ لَا كَالصَّحِيحِ اشْتَهَرَتْ. Well, let's understand this verse before we try to explain it. So he says, Al-Hasan, and the Hasan hadith, it is a known set of chains, turuq. The tariq means the sanad, okay? So he's saying a Hasan hadith is a hadith that has known, meaning accepted chains. Accepted chains does not necessitate that they are sahih. It just means that we know that these asanid exist, all right? Well, ghadat, and the word ghadat, meaning, and it became, the narrators became known, but are not like the sahih. Why? Because their dabt is in between 89 and 75. Tamam? So, how do we define what he's saying right now? He is defining it as known, ma'roof. Okay, what does ma'roof here actually mean? He means that they are not known as being as strong as the sahih. Tamam. Well, what is Hasan? Hasan means I can accept it. I can accept it. This definition that he's giving us, okay, is called al-hasan lidhatih. Al-hasan lidhatih. What does hasan lidhatih mean? Well, by our current definition, the only thing that would change would be my accuracy. Okay, so in other words, I'm going to say what? I'm going to say that the accuracy of Hasan is what? Lesser, right, than the Sahih. Okay, that's what your Hasan would be, a little bit less in your accuracy. That's called Hasan lidhatihi. But he didn't really mention Hasan lighayrihi. Okay, reason why is that he's just following Imam al-Khattabi's explanation of what a Hasan is. Imam al-Khattabi didn't dig beyond that point. Nevertheless, what is Hasan lighayri? And why is it a thing to begin with? The closer you get to a 75% accuracy rate, the more suspect and hard it is for us to accept the narration. Why? Because we cannot be certain that such a narration actually took place. And if I can't have some level of certainty, I cannot utilize that narration. So to solve this problem, right, I look for support. I look for support. So once I get into the 70s, I need backup. Now, normally, I'll accept it, but it could easily be objected. My acceptance could be easily objected. Like, for example, not knowing if Fulan met Fulan before their memory got weaker or after. In this situation, I'm not questioning anyone per se, but rather I'm questioning when did they meet. Because if it's after the individual, like a person meets a sheikh and the sheikh is already too old and lost his memory, well, then I have a right to be a little suspicious because my dabt here cannot be verified. Would it be da'if automatically? Not necessarily, because they both might be fiqh. So my issue here realistically is to do what? To figure out when they met. Because if I cannot determine when they met and someone lost their memory, now I have an accuracy issue. If they're all fiqat, technically there should be nothing wrong with it. Okay, but there's a red flag here over my accuracy. So in order to fix this problem, I want to find someone else that I can verify when they met that individual. If I can find that, that solves everything. Now I can accept the narration with ease. If I can't, then I'm stuck. What is the implications of this? Is that I might have an understanding from that narration to a certain effect or hukm or ruling, and someone can come and say, you're completely wrong because that chain cannot be authenticated. So if I needed it, now I have a problem, because now I'm claiming that there's something there in the deen or XYZ, but I have no way to support the claim. I have no way to support the claim. And you need that backup. You need that correct chain. Now, if you can find other chains that are also sound or maybe close to it, maybe you have the same problem. Okay. Could it work? That's a matter of debate. Like if you found another student narrating from the same teacher whose memory got impacted at some point in their life. but you cannot verify these students if they met that sheikh or not. Now, technically, you should be fine if you have more than one. Okay, if they're narrating the same exact thing, you should be okay, but it can be questioned. All right, and since it can be questioned, a scholar trying to prove a point won't like this level of evidence. Tamam? So that's your Hasan. That's your Hasan. All the other conditions must be met. You must have ittisal. You must have adala. You must have some certain level of dabt to a certain extent. Shudud must be free from shudud. It must be free from illah. Must be free from illah. The author goes on and says, وَكُلُّ مَا عَنْ رُتْبَةِ الْحُسْنِ قَصُرْ, and everything beneath, less in status than Hasan, فَهُوَ الضَّعِيفُ وَهُوَ أَقْسَامٌ كَثُرْ, then it is da'if, and they are many different types. As a matter of fact, the types of da'if are technically speaking, never ending. Yani, you could always add new types to it. I mean, think about this. Found on the internet. Kalam Jamil, like we could literally add this as a definition of a weak narration. Found on the internet. Heard at the market. Received a spam WhatsApp message. Right? This goes on. I mean, really endless. All of these would be different types of weak narrations, right? Okay. Da'if itself can go all the way down to the negatives in percentage. All right. But da'if in its early stages, so one might claim from 75 to 65, is not limited to the accuracy alone. What does this mean? It means the adala, and we'll do this right here. This is for da'if, right? It might drop as well. And you might say, wait a minute, am I going to accept the narration from someone that has bad adala? No, that's why it's called da'if. However, if the adala is suspect, okay, and I can find support, technically I can bring it to Hasan li-ghayrih. And we see this all the time, where a sheikh will be walking down the street, he'll hear music from a home, he'll say, whose home is that? They say Fulan. They pull out their notebook and say, I heard Fulan listening to music. What does that mean? That's it. He just shot that person's adala. Okay. But also, another way in life, you could have your shudud as well. Could it rise from shudud? Certain types of shudud, yeah, it's possible. What about illah? Normally, you shouldn't have any illah because it's already da'if. It's already da'if. Then why am I saying it's not an illah? Because its weakness is not due to the illah. Now, if it does have an illah, we would call it da'if, sure. But normally, I'm not speaking about the illah because the illah is referring to a hidden defect, something that's not noticeable. In a da'if narration, it's usually noticeable from the get-go. Okay. Take, for example, Al-Walid ibn Muslim, who was a famous mudallis. Again, we'll speak about tadlis later. Whenever he says an, we know we have a red flag. Okay. But it does not always necessarily mean that I'm going to reject his narration, because if there's additional support or another day that he mentioned the same hadith and said haddathana, then I'm okay. You see? And that's your intro for da'if. some light da'if might be elevated when there's doubt or assumption or possibly something went wrong, etc., that it might come back up to Hasan. But below 65%, again, these numbers are just to help you get closer to the concepts. Below 65, you're not really going to find anything that anyone with the right mind would say, yeah, you can elevate. No. Beyond that, really, they're not going to allow them to come together. Imagine you had 267% ahadith. They're not, not 67, afwan, 63, right? They're not going to make them support one another, and therefore they'll stand alone. And since they're standing alone, then they'll both be weak and they will not be accepted. Now, we could argue as well that all the way down to from 65 to 50, scholars might utilize these ahadith for fada'il a'mal. What's fada'il a'mal? It just means good pious acts, extra things that you can do, right? Why? Because usually what happens is that these types of narrations are narrated so much or mentioned so much that eventually someone by mistake thinks it's a hadith. Okay. But not only in fada'il, they'll also mention these ones istinasan. Istinasan. What's istinasan? It means that they already have their hukm. It's built upon ijtihad. There's no authentic narrations. However, their ijtihad, it's kind of saying something similar to a weak narration. So they'll mention the narration as additional perspective on the topic at hand. Not that they're using it as evidence. Similar to like when you see the Shafi'iyah, they'll say about al-ma' al-mushammas, they'll mention the athar that are very, very weak. Okay. But they don't go beyond 50%. Okay. They cannot be supported in any way, shape, or form, so therefore they stayed weak. They'll mention those athar. They won't base the ruling on those athar. No, they'll mention them as additional support. Tamam? He says, فَهُوَ الضَّعِيفُ وَهُوَ أَقْسَامًا كَثُرٍ. They are many, many, many different types of ضعيف. In our next segment, we have وَمَا أُضِيفَ لِلنَّبِيِّ الْمَرْفُوعُ وَمَا لِتَابِعٍ هُوَ الْمَقْطُوعُ. Okay, so if a hadith ends at the Prophet, let's change our colors right here, ends at the Prophet as he is the speaker or the final speaker, then this would be called marfu'. And sometimes they'll say رفعه فلان أو روي مرفوعا. Marfu', lifted where? To the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Now, when they're speaking about the marfu', do they mean it's muttasil? Yes and no. Marfu' just means that the chain ends at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, regardless of the status of the chain itself. Okay. If it ends at the Sahabi, so like Umar right here, we call that mawquf. Okay, I don't know why I put two dots there. We call it mawquf if the chain ends at the Sahabi. What if it ends at the Tabi'i? Then we call that maqtu'. Okay, obviously, I can't write with the mouse. Okay, so if you're looking at a chain and the chain is from a tabi'i, okay, remember the two T's there just mean the teacher's teacher from when we were speaking about it earlier. It ends at the tabi'i. So like Nafi', for example, then that's called a maqtu' narration, not a munqati'. That's something different. Somebody would say, but if I read Imam Shafi'i's statements on ahadith, he calls a da'if narration maqtu'. Yes, because during the lifetime of Imam Shafi'i, there was no agreement on the terminology. Later on, the agreement was established. There are calls for going back to that pre-agreement era. Those are very, very, very wrong claims and attempts, because that would throw the whole science into chaos. What we're studying now has been agreed upon for almost 1,000 years. That's enough. We're not going to change it. There's no need to. So if it ends at the tabi'i, this is called maqtu'. If it ends at the sahabi, that's mawquf. If it ends at the Prophet ﷺ saying something, right, doing something, etc., then that's marfu'. Sometimes you might get a narration that stops at the sahabi. However, we still refer to it as marfu'. And that's when a sahabi says, and it was known from the sunnah to do such and such. We say its appearance is mawquf, but its status is marfu'. Because if a sahabi is saying, and the sunnah is such and such, this means this was something that they learned from the Prophet ﷺ. So by its status, it's marfu', but by its appearance, it's mawquf. It's mawquf. Kalam Jamil. Naam. Here we're going to stop today, bi'idhnillah. In our next class, we're going to be starting with al-musnadul muttasilul isnadi min راويه حتى المصطفى ولم يبن. إن شاء الله تعالى نسأل الله سبحانه التوفيق والسداد. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله تعالى لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.